An ambitious journey from rags to riches. In a narrow, dark alley of a big European city, let's say Paris, lived a young man named Alexander, or Alex for short. Alex belonged to a poor family and had no stable source of income. He spent his days wandering the city streets, looking for small jobs. Sometimes he would wash dishes in a restaurant, and other times he would help carry goods outside a shop. The money he earned was just enough to barely provide 2 meals a day for himself and his ailing mother. Alex's mother was a kind and patient woman, but her illness had weakened her. Alex loved his mother dearly, and her every pain broke his heart. He would often stay awake at night to care for her, praying that God would restore her health. In the neighborhood where Alex lived, there was a deep chasm between the rich and the poor. Grand buildings stood in the shadow of the poor people's dilapidated shacks. Inexpensive cars would kick up dust as they passed through the alleys where Alex and others like him toiled to earn a living. Alex always harbored a desire to one day provide a good life for his mother and free her from the suffering of poverty and illness. He knew that to achieve this, he had to work hard and find a way that would lift him and his mother out of this quagmire. One day, Alex went to an old library in the city where he often spent his free time. He had a great passion for reading, even though he couldn't afford to buy new books. On that day, in a corner of the library, he found an old dust-covered book. The pages were yellowed and its cover was worn out, but Alex, out of curiosity, picked it up. Opening the book, he discovered it was the biography of an old merchant who had started his life from scratch and amassed immense wealth through his hard work and intelligence. Alex finished the entire book in one sitting. The merchant's story left a deep impression on his heart. He became convinced that if he wanted to, he too could change his life. This book gave Alex a new determination. He decided he would do everything possible to change his fate. He continued to work hard during the day and, at night, pondered the principles mentioned in the merchant's book. He began to think about what kind of work he could do to earn more money. Alex noticed that many people in his neighborhood were looking for jobs but couldn't find any. He thought, why not create a system that could help these people find work? He didn't have money, but he had an idea. Alex spoke to some like-minded individuals who, like him, were hardworking and honest. He told them about his plan to start a small agency that would provide workers for various jobs. Initially, people didn't take him very seriously, but Alex did not give up. He met with people every day, explained the importance of his plan, and assured them that it would be beneficial for everyone. Finally, some people believed in him and were ready to work with him. Alex used his savings and borrowed some money from friends to rent a small office. This office was located in a narrow alley and had only one table and a few chairs, but for Alex, it was no less than a palace. He named his agency The Helper. His job was to create a list of people who could do various types of work, such as cleaning, gardening, repairs, and transportation. Then he would connect these people with individuals or businesses that needed their services. Work started slowly, but Alex's honesty and hard work quickly earned people's trust. The people who found work through Alex's agency were very happy with his good nature and efficient management. They started telling others about The Helper, and gradually Alex's business began to grow. In a short time, Alex's agency became a reputable name in the city. Big companies and wealthy people also started contacting Alex for their needs. Alex always maintained honesty and hard work as his guiding principles. He also took care of his employees and paid them a fair wage for their efforts. As Alex's business grew, so did his income. He now lived in a good house, and his mother received the best medical care available. Alex provided his mother with all the comforts she had ever dreamed of. Alex not only changed his own life, but also improved the lives of many poor and unemployed people in his neighborhood. Hundreds of people found jobs through his agency, and their homes were filled with prosperity. Time passed, and Alex became a successful and wealthy businessman, but he never forgot his days of poverty. He was always ready to help those who were in trouble. He established several charitable organizations that helped the poor, orphans, and widows. Alex's story became famous throughout the city. People saw him as an example of how a poor and helpless young man could defeat every difficulty in life and touch the heights of success through his hard work, honesty, and courage. One day, Alex went back to the old library where he had found the merchant's biography. He picked up the book again and lovingly touched its worn-out pages. He felt that this book was not just a book, but a guide for him, a lesson that had changed his life. Alex donated a large sum of money to the library's management so they could spread the light of knowledge to more poor and needy people. He believed that education and hard work were the two things that could free any person from the chains of poverty. Alex's life was a story that showed the greatness of hope, hard work, and humanity. He was a poor man who, with his good intentions and struggle, not only became rich but also filled countless lives with happiness. His story still inspires people to work hard, be honest, and help others. Part 2, The New Horizons, continued in English. A new chapter had begun in Alex's life. He wasn't just wealthy, he had established a name for himself throughout the city. The Helper Agency was no longer a small company. It had become a large corporation with multiple branches in different cities. However, Alex knew that the journey was far from over. He now had even bigger dreams. One evening, as he sat in his palace-like office, he looked at an old picture of his mother that he kept on his desk. He remembered her often saying, "Son, a person's true worth isn't what they achieve, but what they do for others." He had always kept his mother's words close to his heart, and now he had the resources to act on them. Alex decided that he didn't have to use all his wealth just for himself. He chose to use this wealth for the welfare of people. He established a philanthropic trust and named it after his mother. The purpose of this trust was to provide education and healthcare facilities to the poor and deserving. He first started a scholarship program. Under this program, children who were intelligent but could not go to school due to poverty were given full education expenses. Alex himself interviewed these children and understood their difficulties. Looking at them, he remembered his own youth and encouraged them with all his heart. One day, Alex met a little girl named Sophie. Sophie was only 10 years old, but there was a strange seriousness on her face. She lived in a broken-down house, and her parents' income was barely enough to get by. Sophie was passionate about engineering, but she knew that it was impossible for her to get that kind of education. Alex saw a sparkle in her eyes and decided to give her a scholarship. He said to Sophie, "My dear, you just study hard. I'll pave the way for you." Sophie's eyes filled with tears of joy. For her, Alex had appeared as an angel. After the success of the scholarship program, Alex started working on another major project. He built a magnificent hospital where poor people could receive free treatment. This hospital was equipped with the most modern facilities so that no patient would be deprived of treatment due to lack of money. Alex also named this hospital after his mother. For him, it wasn't just a building, but the result of his mother's prayers. When his mother found out about the hospital, tears of happiness came to her eyes. She hugged Alex and said, "Son, you have made me so proud." Alex's name was now known not just as a businessman, but as a philanthropist. People looked at him with respect and used him as an example. His story graced the pages of newspapers and magazines. But as always, every success comes with difficulties. Some envious and rival people were not happy with Alex's success. They started plotting against him. They spread rumors that Alex was making his wealth through illegal means and that his charitable works were just for show. These rumors were a difficult test for Alex. He knew he was truthful, but these rumors could harm his reputation. His friends and colleagues stood by him, but people were starting to get suspicious. In a difficult moment, Alex decided he wouldn't stay silent. He called a press conference and, in front of everyone, narrated the story of his life. He told them how he rose from a poor background and how he achieved success through hard work and honesty. He said to the people, "My wealth is the result of my hard work, and I am using it for the welfare of the people." After that, Alex mentioned all the charitable works he had done and explained how he had changed countless lives. He also brought forward all the people he had helped. They all testified to Alex's truthfulness. People's eyes were open. They understood that they had been misled by those who were jealous of a poor man's success. Alex's respect grew even more than before. People now looked at him with even greater admiration. Alex's story was proof that the path of truth and honesty can be difficult, but in the end, it is always victorious. He proved that wealth and success are not just about living for oneself, but also about bringing light into the lives of others. His journey was still ongoing. Part 3. The Global Vision. Alex's journey had taken him from the cobbled streets of a Parisian alley to the gleaming boardrooms of a global corporation. He had proven his worth, not just as a businessman, but as a compassionate human being. But as his influence grew, so did his vision. He wasn't content with just helping people in his own city or even his country. He began to think about a global-scale project, something that could create a lasting impact on humanity. He had always been fascinated by technology, seeing it not just as a tool for business, but as a powerful force for social change. He decided to invest a significant portion of his wealth into a new venture, a non-profit technology incubator called Innovate for Humanity. The goal of this incubator was simple yet ambitious: to find and fund young, talented entrepreneurs from all over the world who had groundbreaking ideas to solve global problems like poverty, lack of clean water, and climate change. Alex traveled extensively, from the bustling tech hubs of Silicon Valley to the remote villages of Africa and Asia. He met brilliant minds with little to no resources. He found a young woman in a small Indian village who had developed a low-cost water purification system. In a remote African country, he discovered a teenager who had created a simple, solar-powered device to charge cell phones, enabling rural communities to stay connected. These were the people Alex wanted to support. He brought them to his incubator in Europe, where he provided them with the funding, mentorship, and resources they needed to turn their ideas into reality. He didn't just give them money, he gave them hope and a platform. He would often say, "The greatest innovators are not always in the biggest cities. Sometimes they are in the most unexpected places, waiting for a chance to change the world." The projects that came out of Innovate for Humanity began to gain international recognition. The water purification system was implemented in drought-stricken regions, saving countless lives. The solar charger became a lifeline for isolated communities, empowering them with communication and information. Alex's name became synonymous with global philanthropy and technological innovation. However, this new path was not without its challenges. The world of technology was cutthroat, and many saw Alex's non-profit approach as a threat. Large corporations, driven by profit, tried to copy his ideas or discredit his projects. There were whispers that Alex was a dreamer who was wasting his fortune on unrealistic ideas. But Alex was no longer the naive young man he once was. He had learned from his past struggles. He had a team of dedicated lawyers and advisors who protected his ventures. More importantly, he had the support of the people he had helped. The young innovators he had mentored stood by him, their success stories becoming the most powerful defense against his critics. His greatest success, however, was a project he called the Education Hub. Recognizing that the greatest barrier to progress in developing countries was a lack of quality education, he launched a massive digital platform. This platform provided free, high-quality educational content from basic literacy to advanced science and mathematics in multiple languages. It was accessible through simple, low-cost devices that Alex's incubator had helped develop. The Education Hub revolutionized learning. Children in remote areas who had never seen a textbook were now able to access a world of knowledge. Teachers in under-resourced schools used the platform to improve their teaching methods. Alex had, in a way, built a modern digital library that was open to everyone, just like the old library where his own journey had begun. In the end, Alex's story wasn't just about a poor man who became rich. It was about a man who used his wealth not for personal gain, but to lift others up. He had moved beyond just helping people find jobs. He was now helping them find their potential and build their own futures. He was no longer just a figure of success. He was a symbol of hope. His life was a testament to the idea that a single act of kindness, a single good idea, can start a ripple effect that changes the world. Alex had come full circle. He had been a seeker of knowledge, a helper, and now he was a global leader, lighting the path for millions who were still in the shadows he had once known so well. His journey was a reminder that true wealth is not measured in money, but in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave behind. And for Alex, the legacy he was building was one of humanity, innovation, and a brighter future for all. Part 4. The Legacy and the Return. Alex's global influence continued to grow, but with all his success and worldly travels, He never forgot the humble beginnings that had shaped him. He had built an empire, not of brick and mortar, but of ideas and human connection. Yet a deep sense of longing for his roots began to pull at his heart. He felt a need to return to the very place where his journey had started, the old narrow alley in Paris. He decided to make a quiet, unannounced trip back. He didn't want the media fanfare or the public attention that followed him everywhere. He just wanted to walk the streets and feel the familiar air of his old neighborhood, the same air that had once held the scent of hardship, and now, for him, the fragrance of memories. As he walked down the familiar lane, he saw how much had changed. The broken-down shacks had been replaced with cleaner, small apartment buildings. The streets were less crowded, and the faces of the people seemed to hold a glimmer of hope that wasn't there before. He noticed a small, renovated community center where kids were learning to code on computers. An elderly man, who used to be a local shopkeeper, was now helping a young boy with his homework. Alex was amazed. He saw his own story reflected in the changes around him. The seeds of change he had sown, through his success and his foundation, had grown into a blooming garden of opportunity. The people in the community, inspired by his journey and helped by his initiatives, had started to uplift themselves and each other. He stopped in front of his old house. It was still standing, but it looked well maintained, with a fresh coat of paint. He saw a young couple coming out, smiling and laughing. They were living the comfortable life he had once only dreamed of. It was a powerful moment for Alex, seeing his past and the future of his neighborhood standing side by side. He then went to the old library. It was no longer just old and dusty. It had been transformed into a modern, vibrant learning hub, thanks to the large donation he had made years ago. The library was bustling with students, young and old, all engrossed in books or working on computers. The old librarian, who had once been a kind stranger to a poor young man, recognized him instantly. With tears in his eyes, he said, "Alex, your book changed your life, but your kindness changed ours." Alex smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. It was in that moment that he realized the true extent of his success. It wasn't the billions in his bank account, the luxurious life he led, or the global recognition. His true wealth was in the lives he had touched and the positive change he had created in the world. He stood there for a long time, watching the faces around him, the faces of a new generation full of potential and hope. He knew his journey was now complete, not because he had reached a destination, but because he had built a bridge for others to cross. He had started as a boy with nothing but a dream, and he had become a man who gave dreams to countless others. Alex's legacy was not just a collection of charities or successful businesses. It was the living, breathing proof that one person's struggle and perseverance can light up the world for many. He returned to his global life with a renewed purpose, knowing that his greatest achievement was the profound, lasting change he had brought back home. His story, which started in poverty, was now a beacon of hope for all. The eternal lesson. Alex's return to his old neighborhood had been a profound experience. It had filled him with a new sense of peace and satisfaction. He was no longer a man driven by ambition alone. He was now a guardian of a legacy. He knew that his journey was not just for him, but for all the people who looked up to him as a symbol of hope. He decided to focus on a new mission, sharing his story and the principles he had learned along the way. He wrote a book, not about his wealth, but about the lessons of life, poverty, hard work, and the true meaning of success. The book, titled The Helper's Path, became a global bestseller. Its message resonated with millions of people from all walks of life, from struggling students in distant lands to seasoned entrepreneurs in corporate towers. In the book, Alex shared personal anecdotes from his journey. He talked about the loneliness he felt, the moments of doubt, and the sacrifices he had to make. He also spoke about the kindness of strangers, the power of a single book, and the importance of never forgetting one's roots. He wrote about his mother's wise words and how they became his guiding light. The success of the book led to an international speaking tour. Alex traveled the world, addressing large audiences in stadiums and small groups in community centers. He spoke not as a billionaire, but as a man who had been through hardship and had come out stronger. He often began his speeches with a simple line, "I am Alex, and I was once a helper who needed help myself." He used his fame and influence to promote the idea of microphilanthropy, encouraging people to perform small acts of kindness every day. He believed that big change begins with small actions. He started a campaign called the Ripple Effect, which inspired millions of people to help their neighbors, support local businesses, and mentor young people. One day after a speech in a remote part of the world, a young boy with torn clothes came up to him. He held out a tattered copy of The Helper's Path. The boy said, "Sir, I read your book. My father and I are very poor. We live in a small hut, but after reading your story, I know that if I work hard and am honest, I can change my life. Thank you for giving me hope." Tears welled up in Alex's eyes. He hugged the boy, remembering himself at that age, full of dreams but uncertain about the future. He looked at the boy and saw not just a person in need, but a reflection of his younger self. It was in that moment that he understood the true essence of his legacy. His wealth and success were just tools. The real purpose was to inspire and empower others. As Alex grew older, he gradually stepped away from the day-to-day operations of his empire. He entrusted his companies and foundations to a new generation of leaders who shared his values of integrity and compassion. He spent his final years living a quiet life, surrounded by his loved ones, but his influence continued to spread across the globe. His story became a timeless legend. It was told in classrooms, passed down in families, and used as an example of what is possible when a person combines hard work with a good heart. The boy from the alley, who had nothing but hope and a dream, had not only conquered poverty, but had also left an eternal lesson for humanity. True success is not what you gain, but what you give back. Part 6. The Return of the Mentor. Decades had passed since Alex had transformed his old neighborhood and penned his bestseller, The Helper's Path. He was now an elderly man, his hair a distinguished silver, but his eyes still held the same spark of ambition and kindness. He had retreated from the public eye, dedicating his time to gardening and quiet reflection. However, the world, it seemed, wasn't ready to let go of him. One day he received a letter from Sophie, the young girl he had mentored years ago. Sophie had not only become a successful engineer, but had also gone on to lead his Innovate for Humanity incubator. Her letter was filled with a mix of excitement and concern. She wrote about a new generation of brilliant young minds, just like she once was, who were full of ideas but lacked the mentorship to navigate the complex world of business and social impact. Sophie had an idea. She wanted to launch a new program called the Alex Project, where Alex himself would personally mentor a small group of the most promising young innovators. She believed that while his book had been a source of inspiration, his direct guidance would be a priceless gift. Initially, Alex hesitated. He had enjoyed his peaceful retirement and felt his time had passed. But as he read Sophie's letter again, he remembered the old bookseller who had encouraged him, the merchant whose biography had changed his life, and his mother's words about helping others. He realized his life's purpose was not just to build a legacy, but to nurture the next generation of leaders. He decided to accept. The Alex Project was launched with great anticipation. Alex selected 5 young men and women from different parts of the world, each with a unique project to address a pressing global issue. There was a girl from a war-torn country who wanted to use technology to provide psychological support to refugees. A young man from a small island nation had an idea for a floating farm to combat rising sea levels. Alex met with them not in a grand boardroom, but in his own quiet study, surrounded by books and memories. He didn't just give them advice. He shared his own failures, his fears, and the moments when he wanted to give up. He taught them that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers, but about having the courage to face challenges with integrity. He taught them about the importance of empathy, reminding them that they should never forget the people they were trying to help. Walk in their shoes, he would say. Understand their pain and their dreams. That's where true innovation comes from. Under his mentorship, the young innovators flourished. They refined their ideas, secured funding, and began to make a real impact on the world. The girl from the war-torn country launched her app, which was now being used by thousands of refugees. The young man's floating farm prototype was being tested and showed great promise for food security in coastal regions. Alex saw a part of his younger self in each of them. He had come full circle from being the student to becoming the ultimate teacher. He wasn't just building businesses anymore. He was building a legacy of leaders who would carry on his work long after he was gone. His final act of giving was to pass on the knowledge and wisdom he had gained from a life lived fully, from the very bottom to the very top. Part 7. The Unwritten. Chapter Alex's final years were not about building a new business or launching another foundation. They were about the quiet, profound work of mentorship. The young innovators from the Alex Project had become his extended family, visiting him regularly and sharing their progress. He would listen to their challenges, offer his wisdom, and watch with a sense of immense pride as they stepped into their roles as global changemakers. One of his final and most heartfelt projects was the restoration of his childhood home. He bought the small house and transformed it into a small museum, not of his achievements, but of the lessons he had learned. On the wall where his mother's picture once hung, he placed a simple plaque. It read, "From this humble beginning, a journey of 1,000 miles was started with a single step of hope." He filled the museum with artifacts that represented key moments in his life. A worn-out pair of shoes he wore during his days of poverty, the first ledger from the Helper Agency, and most importantly, a replica of the old dusty book from the library. He wanted to show everyone who visited that his story wasn't about the grand victories but about the small daily acts of courage that led to them. The museum became a pilgrimage site for aspiring entrepreneurs and dreamers from all over the world. They came to see not a mansion, but a small house that held a powerful story. They came to be inspired, not by a billionaire's wealth, but by a man's journey from struggle to success. One day, as Alex sat on a bench outside the museum, a young girl approached him. She looked shy but determined. "Sir, are you Alex?" she asked. Alex smiled. "I am," he replied. "I am from a small village, and I want to start a business," she said. "But everyone tells me it's impossible. They say I'm just a poor girl with a crazy dream." Alex looked into her eyes and saw a reflection of himself from so many years ago. He didn't tell her about his wealth or his companies. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, old, and well-worn coin. "Take this," he said, handing it to her. "It's a reminder. Don't ever let anyone tell you that your dream is crazy. Your biggest strength is your vision. Keep this coin, and when you feel doubt, remember that it's not where you come from that matters. It's where you're going and what you do along the way." The girl's eyes lit up. She took the coin and held it tightly, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. As she walked away, Alex knew his work was complete. His story was no longer just his. It was now a part of her journey and countless others. Alex's legacy was not just a collection of businesses or foundations. It was the living, breathing testament that one person's life, lived with integrity and kindness, can become a beacon of hope that shines for all time. His life was the final, most important chapter of his book, a story that would continue to inspire people long after he was gone. It was the unwritten chapter of a life lived for others. Part 8. The Full Circle. Alex's final years were peaceful. He spent his days watching the world he had helped shape, a world filled with the seeds of hope he had planted. The small museum in his old neighborhood was a constant source of joy for him. He would often sit on the bench outside observing the visitors who came from all corners of the globe. They weren't just tourists, they were pilgrims of perseverance, seeking a story that would give them strength. One crisp autumn morning, a woman arrived at the museum. She was dressed simply, but her eyes held a familiar, determined sparkle. She walked directly to the bench where Alex was sitting. "Sir Alex?" she asked, her voice soft but confident. Alex looked up. "Yes, my dear." "My name is Maria," she said, pulling out a small, well-worn coin from her pocket. "Do you remember this?" Alex's heart skipped a beat. He immediately recognized the coin he had given to the young girl so many years ago. It was the same one, but now it was polished from years of being held tight in a hopeful hand. Maria told him her story. She had held on to the coin, a constant reminder of his words. She had gone back to her village, started a small business, and faced countless challenges. But every time she felt like giving up, she would hold the coin and remember his message. Her business had grown, and she had used her success to build a school for the children in her village. I came here to tell you that your story wasn't just in the book, she said, her voice filled with emotion. It's a part of our lives now. You didn't just give me a coin. You gave me a legacy to build. Tears streamed down Alex's face. He looked at Maria, at her confident posture and her kind eyes, and saw his own journey reflected in hers. This was the true meaning of his life's work. It wasn't about the money he had made or the buildings he had constructed. It was about the ripple effect of one simple act of kindness, passed from one person to another, across generations. He took Maria's hand and placed the coin back in her palm. This is no longer my story, he said. This is your story now, and you must pass it on just as I did. With a final loving glance at the small museum and the woman who carried his legacy forward, Alex closed his eyes. His life's journey was complete. It had begun with an act of faith and ended with an act of profound love and mentorship. Alex's story became a timeless legend, whispered in the corridors of power and shared in the humble homes of the poor. It was a story not of a boy who became a man, but of a man who became a legend. A legend who taught the world that the most beautiful part of life is not what you achieve for yourself, but the hope you ignite in others. 48, 5:59 p.m. Hamadakram Toru, Part 9. The Living Museum. Alex's peaceful passing was not an end, but a new beginning for his legacy. The small museum in the Parisian alley became more than just a place of history. It became a living monument to his ideals. Maria, the young woman from the remote village, took on the responsibility of managing it. She expanded the museum's purpose, turning it into a center for mentorship and innovation, just as Alex had done with the Alex Project. The museum now housed not only artifacts from Alex's life, but also a new section dedicated to the young entrepreneurs he had mentored. Visitors could read their stories, see their projects, and even speak with some of them who volunteered at the center. The place buzzed with energy, filled with the conversations of dreamers sharing their ideas and receiving guidance. Maria ensured that the museum remained free to the public, a place where anyone, regardless of their background, could come and find inspiration. She established a scholarship fund, the Alex Legacy Scholarship, which was used to support young people who wanted to start their own social impact projects. The first recipient of this scholarship was a young boy who had been visiting the museum every day, just as a young Alex had once visited the library. One of the most touching traditions at the museum was the kindness wall. Visitors were encouraged to write down an act of kindness they had performed or witnessed and pin it to the wall. The wall was always full, a vibrant tapestry of human goodness inspired by Alex's life story. It was a testament to his belief that small acts could create a ripple effect of change. The world had come to know Alex not just as a successful businessman, but as a philosophy. The Alex Way, as it was called, was a new business model centered on purpose, people, and planet in that order. Companies inspired by his legacy began to prioritize social responsibility and environmental sustainability, proving that profit and purpose could go hand in hand. Alex's name echoed through boardrooms and schoolyards alike, a whispered reminder that true success was about leaving the world better than you found it. Part 10. The End of an Era, the Start of a Legacy. Decades turned into a century. The world had changed dramatically, but Alex's legacy remained untouched. The small museum in Paris was still a beacon of hope, and the Alex Way was now a global standard. The companies he founded, now run by generations of leaders he had inspired, continued to innovate and serve humanity. The final chapter of Alex's story was not written in a book or told through a documentary. It was lived out every day in the countless lives he had touched. It was in the eyes of a child in a remote village who could now attend a school built by his foundation. It was in the clean water flowing from a tap in a desert community, a project funded by his legacy. It was in the business ethics of a CEO who chose to prioritize their employees over profit, a lesson learned from the helper's path. The old library where it all began still stood, a testament to the power of a single book. And the bench outside the small museum was still a place of quiet reflection, now visited by the great-grandchildren of the people Alex had once helped. They would sit there, holding a copy of his book, and feel connected to the man who had shown them that a life of meaning was a life lived for others. Alex had started as a boy with nothing but hope and a dream. He had become a man who was not just a symbol of success, but a force of nature that had created a beautiful, unending ripple effect of kindness and change. His story had come full circle, not with a final goodbye, but with a timeless legacy that would continue to inspire generations to come. Part 11, The Ripple Effect, continues. Decades passed since the final words of Alex's story were written. The world had evolved, but the principles of the Alex Way were now woven into the very fabric of society. The small museum in the Parisian alley was no longer small. It had become a sprawling campus known as the Alex Institute for Global Change. It was a hub of learning and innovation, attracting the brightest minds from every corner of the world. Maria, now an elderly woman with a gentle smile and a lifetime of wisdom, served as the Institute's matriarch. Her hair was silver, but her eyes still held the same spark of passion she had when she first met Alex. She was a living testament to his belief in the power of one person to make a difference. The kindness wall she started was now a global tradition, with digital versions online where people could share their acts of kindness and connect with others. The Alex Legacy Scholarship had grown into a global foundation, funding thousands of projects each year. One of the most impactful was a new initiative called Seeds of Change, which supported young leaders in developing sustainable agriculture and clean energy solutions in their own communities. The projects were not just about technology, they were about empowering people and building a future where everyone had the resources they needed to thrive. Part 12, The Next Generation. Among the new generation of leaders at the Institute was a young woman named Lena. She was the great-granddaughter of the very first scholarship recipient, the boy who had visited the museum every day. Lena had inherited his passion for helping others and had dedicated her life to carrying on Alex's work. She was a brilliant engineer who specialized in sustainable water systems, a field that was still in high demand in many parts of the world. Lena's most ambitious project was to create a mobile desalination unit that could be transported to remote, water-scarce regions. It was a complex and challenging project, but she was driven by a story her grandfather had told her about a child in a desert community who had clean water because of one of Alex's early projects. She felt a deep connection to that story and to the man whose legacy she was now a part of. She often found herself sitting on the bench outside the old museum, which was now a part of the Institute campus. She would look at the bronze statue of Alex that stood in the courtyard, a simple statue of him holding a book, with a kind expression on his face. She would hold a copy of his book just as her ancestors had, and feel a sense of purpose and a connection to the man who had started it all. Part 13, The Timeless Story. One day as Lena sat on the bench, a young boy approached her. He looked a lot like the young boy her grandfather had been, wide-eyed and curious. He was holding a small, worn-out book. "Is this the book about Alex?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. Lena smiled. "Yes, it is," she said. "Did you find it in the library?" The boy nodded. "I read about how he was poor and had nothing, but he still found a way to help people. My family's poor too. Does that mean I can help people one day?" Lena's eyes filled with tears of joy. She saw in the boy's face the same hope that had driven Alex. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, "It means you already can. You don't need to have money to start. You just need to have a kind heart and a dream." The boy's face lit up. He looked at the statue of Alex, then back at Lena, a newfound determination in his eyes. Lena knew then that Alex's story was not just a history lesson, it was a living guide for a new generation. The ripple effect was not just a historical event, it was a continuous motion, a timeless story being lived out every day by people who believed that one person could truly change the world. Alex's legacy wasn't just about what he built. It was about the endless chain of kindness he had inspired, a chain that would never be broken. Part 14, The Global Forum. The Alex Institute for Global Change announced its first Global Kindness Forum. The event was designed to bring together leaders and innovators from all over the world to share their ideas on social responsibility and sustainable development. Lena, now a leading figure at the Institute, was the forum's main organizer. She had invited pioneers from various fields, from farmers in developing nations to CEOs of multinational corporations. Her goal was to show that the Alex way could be applied to any industry, no matter how big or small. The forum's theme was the ripple of one. It was a tribute to the idea that a single act of kindness could create a wave of change. The event was held at the Institute's new auditorium, a modern, environmentally friendly building that stood next to the old museum. The auditorium was a marvel of sustainable architecture, powered entirely by solar and wind energy. During the opening ceremony, Lena stood on the stage, looking out at the diverse crowd, and felt a profound sense of purpose. She knew that this event was not just a conference, it was a new chapter in Alex's legacy. Part 15. The Unspoken Promise. As the forum began, a woman from a remote village in the Amazon rainforest took the stage. She spoke about how a solar-powered water pump, funded by the Alex Legacy Foundation, had transformed her community. Before, they had to walk for hours to get clean water. Now they had it right in their village, which had allowed them to start a small garden and even a school for the children. She spoke with tears in her eyes, but her voice was strong and filled with gratitude. Later, a young tech entrepreneur from a bustling city shared his story. His company had created an app that connected food banks with restaurants to reduce food waste. He told the audience that he had started the company after reading Alex's book and being inspired by his focus on purpose over profit. He showed a video of his team working with volunteers, and the crowd was moved by the simple, effective way they were making a difference. Lena watched each speaker with a growing sense of awe. She realized that Alex's story was no longer just about one person's journey. It was a shared narrative. Each person on that stage, in that audience, and in every corner of the world was a living part of his legacy. They were all fulfilling an unspoken promise to make the world a better place, one kind act at a time. Part 16. The Timeless Echo. The forum concluded with a beautiful tribute to Alex. The lights dimmed, and the screens around the auditorium showed a simple animation. It started with a single drop of water, representing an act of kindness, which created a small ripple. As more drops were added, the ripples grew larger and larger until they covered the entire screen. The final image was a clear, calm body of water with the words "The ripple effect continues" written over it. Lena then asked everyone to stand and hold the hand of the person next to them. She said, "Alex showed us that success is not just about what you achieve, but about how you help others. The true measure of our lives is the positive ripple we create." She looked at the faces in the audience, filled with emotion and a renewed sense of hope. The Global Kindness Forum became an annual event, and the Alex Way was no longer just a business model. It was a global movement. Alex's legacy continued to expand, not just through the projects he had started, but through the countless people who were now inspired to start their own. His story echoed through time, reminding everyone that a life of meaning was a life lived for others, and that the greatest legacy was the one you left in the hearts of those you touched. Part 17. A New Chapter in the Old Library. The old library, where Alex's journey began, was now a historical landmark. It had been renovated but kept its original charm, with the same tall bookshelves and the quiet reading nooks. One day, a young librarian named Sam, who had recently started working there, found an old, tattered journal tucked away in a forgotten corner. It was Alex's first journal, filled with his hopes, fears, and early ideas. Sam spent weeks reading the journal, captivated by Alex's handwritten thoughts. He learned about the small acts of kindness Alex performed and the simple ideas he had to help his community. He was especially touched by Alex's entry about a homeless man he had bought a meal for, an act that sparked his lifelong mission. Sam felt a deep connection to the words and realized that the library was not just a building, it was the starting point of a legacy. Part 18. The digital legacy inspired by the journal, Sam started a digital project called the Alex Archives. He scanned the journal and other documents related to Alex's life and made them available online for free. The project quickly gained global attention. People from all over the world could now read Alex's personal thoughts and see how his ideas evolved from simple sketches to world-changing projects. The archives became a popular resource for students, entrepreneurs, and anyone seeking inspiration. It included not only Alex's journals, but also recordings of his early speeches, interviews, and even letters he had written to the people he had helped. It was a complete and authentic look into the mind of a man who had changed the world with kindness. The project proved that even in a digital age, a legacy of good could be kept alive and accessible to all. Part 19. The New Kindness Wall. The online archives also featured a new interactive kindness wall. Instead of just writing on a physical wall, people could now share their own stories of kindness through text, photos, and videos. The wall was a vibrant, ever-growing collection of human goodness. A person in Japan shared a video of their community cleaning a local park. A family in Brazil posted pictures of a food drive they organized. The digital wall became a powerful tool for connecting people and showing the global reach of Alex's philosophy. Sam was overwhelmed by the response. He saw how the online community was not only celebrating Alex's past, but actively carrying his legacy into the future. The simple act of digitizing a few old papers had created a global movement, all because of the timeless power of one man's story. Part 20. The Circle of Giving. One day, Sam received an email from a young girl. She wrote that she had found the Alex archives and had been inspired to start a small project in her neighborhood, helping her elderly neighbors with their groceries. She said that she didn't have much, but she knew that even a small act of kindness could make a difference. Her email included a picture of her smiling with an elderly woman holding a bag of groceries. Sam smiled as he read the email. He had started with a simple task of organizing a dusty old journal, and now he was a part of a new chapter in Alex's story. He realized that the legacy wasn't just about Alex, but about the countless people who were now inspired to be like him. The circle of giving had come full circle, from a young boy in a library to a young girl in a neighborhood, proving that the most powerful legacies are the ones that inspire others to create their own. Part 21. The Seed of Inspiration. Sam's project, the Alex Archives, had grown into a global phenomenon. The online kindness wall was overflowing with stories from every corner of the globe. One particular story caught his attention. It was from a small remote village in the mountains of Peru. A young boy named Mateo had used the archives to learn about Alex's early projects. He was fascinated by how Alex, with nothing but an idea, had started small projects to help his community. Mateo's village had no running water, and the nearest well was a long walk away, a journey that was especially difficult for the elderly and sick. Inspired by Alex's story of using simple solutions to solve big problems, Mateo decided to take action. He didn't have any money or resources, so he turned to the archives for guidance. He found a detailed account of one of Alex's early designs for a simple, gravity-fed water system. Using this as a blueprint, he convinced his family and a few neighbors to help him. They used recycled materials and tools they had on hand, and after months of hard work, they built a small system that collected rainwater and funneled it to a central tank in the village. It wasn't perfect, and the water was only enough for basic needs, but it was a start. The project was proof that Alex's lessons were not just historical, they were practical tools for change. Part 22. The Alex Institute's New Mission. Back at the Alex Institute, Lena and Maria were deeply moved by Mateo's story, which had been shared on the kindness wall. They saw in him the same spirit that had driven Alex, a belief that anyone, regardless of their circumstances, could make a difference. The story of the small Peruvian village became a powerful example of the Institute's mission in action. Lena realized that while the Institute was doing great work on a global scale, it was the small grassroots efforts that truly carried Alex's legacy forward. She proposed a new initiative to the board of the Institute called the Global Seeds Project. The idea was to find and support individuals like Mateo who were starting small-scale, community-led projects in their own towns and villages. The Institute wouldn't just give them money, it would provide mentorship, resources, and technical guidance. It was a return to the core of Alex's philosophy, empowering people to help themselves. The first grant from this new project went directly to Mateo's village to help them expand their water system and create a more sustainable solution for their community. The story of Alex's humble beginnings was now directly inspiring a new generation of helpers. Part 23. The Timeless Connection. Years passed. Mateo, now a young man, was studying to be an engineer on a scholarship from the Alex Institute. He often visited the same library where his journey had begun, a small building in his village that had been built with the Institute's help. He had read every book about Alex's life, and he found a deep connection to the man he had never met. He saw that his own struggles and triumphs mirrored Alex's. They were both boys who had started with nothing but an idea and a desire to help others. One day, while working on a new design for a larger water filtration system, Matteo received a message from Lena. She was traveling through the region and wanted to meet him. When she arrived, she wasn't in a fancy car or a suit. She was wearing simple clothes and had a warm smile. She told him how much his story had inspired the entire institute and how it had led to the creation of the Global Seeds Project. She looked at his designs and saw a future full of possibility. In that moment, Matteo realized that Alex's legacy was more than just a history to be studied. It was a living, breathing connection between people across time and distance, a testament to the idea that a single act of kindness, no matter how small, could inspire a movement that lasts for generations. Part 24. The Global Forum on the hillside years passed, and Matteo, now a respected engineer, decided to host the Global Kindness Forum in his own village. He felt it was important to bring the forum's message back to its roots, to the very place where a small act of kindness, a shared blueprint, had transformed a community. The event was not held in a grand auditorium, but on a hillside overlooking the valley, with the mountains as a natural backdrop. There were no expensive screens or elaborate presentations, only simple benches and a stage made of local wood. The goal was to show that innovation and compassion could happen anywhere, with anyone. People came from all over the world, not just for the conference, but to see the living example of change. They saw the water system Matteo had helped build, now expanded and serving every home. They saw the small school that had been established and the gardens that provided food for the village. The forum was a powerful contrast to the high-tech conferences of the past. It was a testament to the idea that true progress wasn't measured by profit margins, but by the quality of life it brought to people. Matteo spoke about how the ripples of Alex's kindness had reached his small village and how his story was not just a legend, but a practical guide for building a better world. Part 25. A Quiet Revelation. During the forum, Lena and Matteo walked through the village, sharing stories and reflecting on Alex's legacy. They passed a group of children playing near a fountain, a newer part of the village's water system. One of the children, a little girl, ran up to Matteo and offered him a small, colorful flower. "This is for you," she said shyly. "My mother says you helped us have clean water to grow flowers." Matteo smiled, thanked her, and felt a profound sense of fulfillment. It was in that moment that Lena and Matteo had a shared, unspoken understanding. Alex's legacy wasn't a static monument. It was a living, breathing part of the world, growing and evolving through every person it touched. They walked to the edge of the village and looked out at the valley. Lena spoke about how her grandfather had been inspired by Alex, and now Matteo was carrying the torch for a new generation. They realized that their connection wasn't a coincidence. It was a part of the continuous ripple effect that had started with a single act of kindness decades ago. The old stories of Alex's life were now woven into the fabric of a new reality, proving that hope, once planted, never truly dies. Part 26. The Unending Legacy. The forum concluded, and the world went back to its daily routine. But something had changed. The story of the small Peruvian village and its transformation became a global sensation. It was a powerful reminder that simple acts of kindness and innovation could have a monumental impact. The Global Seeds Project received an influx of applications, and a new wave of grassroots leaders emerged, each with a small project to make their community better. In the end, Alex's legacy was not just about the millions he had helped or the companies he had built. It was about the endless chain of good he had started. His story was a timeless echo, a whispered promise that even the smallest act of kindness could create a beautiful, unending ripple effect. The story had come full circle, not with a final end, but with a new beginning, as a new generation of dreamers, inspired by a man they had never met, began to write their own stories of hope and change. The legacy of Alex was no longer a story, it was a way of life, and it would continue to inspire for generations to come. Part 27. The old man on the bench. Decades passed, and the world became even more interconnected, with information and ideas spreading at the speed of light. Yet in the midst of this digital age, a quiet, ancient tradition remained. An old man, with a face full of kind wrinkles and eyes that held 100 stories, would sit on the same bench outside the old Parisian museum, where Alex's journey had been so beautifully honored. The museum had grown into a massive campus, but the small bench remained untouched, a symbol of quiet contemplation. The man wasn't famous. He wasn't a CEO or a public figure. He was simply a retired teacher who had spent his life inspiring students with the story of Alex. Every day he would sit there and watch the world go by. He saw students with laptops discussing new social ventures, families holding hands and pointing at the bronze statue of Alex, and young children in awe of the kindness wall. He had a copy of Alex's book with him, its pages worn from years of reading and sharing. He never spoke unless someone approached him. When they did, he wouldn't just tell them about Alex's accomplishments. He would tell them about the small, often forgotten moments. The kindness Alex showed a stranger, the time he gave away his last meal, and the way he believed in people when no one else did. The old man wasn't just a storyteller. He was a living link to the past, a keeper of the most human parts of Alex's legacy. Part 28. A legacy of quiet acts. One afternoon, a young woman named Zara, a brilliant tech innovator, sat on the bench next to the old man. She was a celebrity in her field, having just sold her company for a massive fortune. But she felt a profound emptiness. She had achieved great success, but had lost sight of her purpose. She was at the museum to find some kind of meaning. She saw the old man in his well-worn book and decided to speak to him. She told him about her success and her emptiness. The old man listened patiently, his eyes full of compassion. He then opened the book to a page he had highlighted years ago. It was a simple quote from Alex. "The greatest success is not measured by what you have, but by how much you have given away." He told Zara a story that wasn't in any of the public records. He spoke of how Alex, at the height of his success, would anonymously pay for students' tuition or send food to struggling families, without ever seeking recognition. He told her that Alex's greatest legacy wasn't in his businesses or foundations, but in the quiet, unseen acts of kindness that had changed individual lives forever. The old man's words resonated with Zara. She realized that she had been chasing the wrong kind of success. Her mind, once focused on algorithms and profits, now began to think about people and purpose. Part 29. The New Way. Inspired by the old man's stories, Zara decided to create something new. She didn't want to start another company or a foundation. Instead, she used her wealth and her technical skills to create a new kind of online platform, a silent network for kindness. It wasn't a place to post your good deeds or get recognition. It was a private, anonymous platform where people could request help, and others could offer it. People could ask for help with medical bills, or simply for a word of encouragement, and a network of volunteers would respond without ever revealing their names. It was a digital embodiment of the unseen acts of kindness the old man had told her about. The platform was named the Echo Project. The echo was not a loud sound, but a soft, continuous ripple of compassion. It was a place where people could connect through their humanity without the need for public praise. The old man, still sitting on his bench, saw the headlines about the Echo Project, but never told anyone he had a part in it. He knew that the most beautiful legacies weren't about grand gestures or public recognition. They were about the quiet, timeless echo of one person's kindness inspiring another, a beautiful, unending circle of giving that would continue as long as there were people who believed that hope was worth sharing. Part 30. The Curator's Discovery. The old library in Paris, where Alex's journey began, now had a new head curator, a bright young historian named Elena. She was meticulous and passionate, and her current project was to digitize the library's oldest archives. One afternoon, while carefully examining a dusty box, she found a series of letters tied with a simple string. The handwriting was old and faded, but the words were clear. The letters were from Alex to the first young boy he ever mentored, the one who would later become a renowned scholar. The letters were not about business or success. They were about hope, patience, and the importance of helping others, even when it felt like a small effort. Elena read the letters late into the night. She learned that Alex had not only supported the boy financially, but had also guided him with personal advice, encouraging him to pursue his dreams, no matter how difficult the path. The letters were filled with simple, profound wisdom that hadn't been shared in any of the books or documentaries about him. They showed a side of Alex that was even more personal and intimate than his public legacy suggested. It was a man who understood that true greatness was built one relationship at a time, one quiet word of encouragement at a time. Elena felt as if she had been given a secret key to understanding the very heart of Alex's legacy. Part 31. A new exhibition. Inspired by the letters, Elena decided to create a new exhibition at the library. Instead of focusing on Alex's business successes, the exhibition would be called The Whispers of Kindness. It would display the letters, along with other artifacts that told stories of the small, personal ways Alex had touched individual lives. There were old photographs of him teaching a child to read in a village, a worn-out blanket he had given to a homeless man, and a small, handmade wooden bird a grateful family had carved for him. The exhibition was a quiet, powerful contrast to the grand scale of the Alex Institute and his global legacy. The new exhibit resonated deeply with visitors. People would stand for a long time in front of the framed letters, moved by the private, tender words. They saw that Alex's life was not a series of grand achievements, but a collection of small, compassionate acts that, when added together, created something extraordinary. The exhibition became a pilgrimage site for those who wanted to understand the soul of the Alex way. It was a reminder that the biggest impact often comes from the smallest and most genuine gestures. Part 32. The Quiet Scholar. A respected scholar, now in his 90s, heard about the new exhibition and decided to visit the library one last time. He was a frail man, and as he walked through the exhibit, a wave of memories washed over him. He was the young boy who had received those letters from Alex. He saw his own handwritten replies, preserved and now on display. He remembered the feeling of receiving those letters, a feeling of being seen and believed in by someone who had no reason to care. Alex's guidance had not only shaped his career, but his entire life. He stopped in front of a letter where Alex had written, "Always remember, the true light you carry is not the one that shines on you, but the one you use to light the path for others." The scholar felt a deep, profound gratitude. He had spent his life teaching and mentoring, passing on not only knowledge, but also the same quiet compassion that Alex had shown him. He realized that the greatest inheritance Alex had left him wasn't just a scholarship. It was a way of being in the world, a legacy of quiet, unending kindness. He had spent his life living the Alex way without ever truly realizing it. Part 33. The Eternal Cycle. The old scholar looked up and saw Elena watching him with a respectful and knowing smile. She had pieced together who he was from his old letters. He approached her, his eyes full of tears. "He gave me a life," the scholar said, his voice trembling, "and he never asked for anything in return." Elena simply nodded. She had heard this story of quiet gratitude many times since the exhibit opened. It was a common thread that wove through countless lives touched by Alex's generosity. The exhibition showed that Alex's legacy was not a single event, but an eternal cycle. A single act of kindness inspired a young boy who grew up to inspire countless students, who in turn carried the torch of compassion into their own lives. The scholar's life was proof of this beautiful, unending chain. As he left the library, he looked back at the exhibit, a quiet testament to the man who had started with nothing but hope and had created a ripple of kindness that would echo through time, long after the last book was read and the final story was told. Part 34. The Garden of Dreams. In the heart of what was once a barren piece of land, in a bustling city, a beautiful community garden now thrived. This garden was the brainchild of a young woman named Lily, a modern artist and urban planner. Lily had no direct connection to Alex, but she had been deeply inspired by the Whispers of Kindness exhibit. She was especially moved by the simple personal acts of generosity that had defined his life. She realized that Alex's legacy wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about transforming spaces and communities through small, deliberate acts. She decided to use her skills to turn a neglected, empty lot into a place of life and connection. She rallied volunteers from all over the city, and they worked for months, clearing debris and planting flowers, vegetables, and fruit trees. The garden became a gathering place for people from all walks of life. Children learned about farming, seniors shared stories on benches, and neighbors who had never spoken before became friends. It was a living, breathing testament to Alex's belief that you could create beauty and connection out of nothing but hope and hard work. The garden wasn't just a place to grow food, it was a place to grow community. Part 35. The Digital Bridge. Lily's garden project quickly gained attention on a new social media platform called the Echo Project, founded by Zara. She posted pictures and videos of the garden's progress, and people from all over the world began to follow her journey. They sent her encouragement, advice, and even seeds from their own gardens. Lily's project became a powerful example of how Alex's legacy could be applied in a completely modern context, using technology to bridge the gap between people and communities. One day, an old man from a remote village in India saw Lily's posts. His village was struggling with food shortages, and he was amazed by how the garden had transformed a small urban space. He messaged Lily, and with the help of a translator, they began a conversation. The old man asked for advice on how to start a similar project in his village. Lily, using her knowledge and the resources from her network, guided him step by step. The kindness of a young woman in a city was now helping a village thousands of miles away, all through the unseen, quiet network of kindness, inspired by a man who had lived a century before. Part 36. The Living Legacy. Years passed, and both the urban garden and the village garden flourished. The two communities, connected only by a quiet digital platform and a shared spirit of generosity, began to learn from each other. The urban gardeners sent them seeds that could grow in their climate, and the villagers shared their traditional farming knowledge. The story of their connection, a beautiful and unexpected result of Alex's ripple effect, became a powerful example of the boundless nature of his legacy. The final chapter of Alex's story was not written in a book or told in a documentary. It was lived out in the daily acts of a young artist tending to her garden, a farmer planting seeds from a different continent, and in the countless other quiet moments of connection and compassion. Alex's legacy wasn't a historical artifact. It was a living, breathing force that continued to inspire and connect people across time and space. It showed that the most beautiful and enduring stories are the ones that are never fully told, but are instead lived out by each new generation, a beautiful, unending testament to the power of kindness.